Okay, picture this, because I think it's one of the most universally frustrating experiences we all share. It's a quiet evening, you finally hit that comfortable spot in your day, the world has sort of softened at the edges, you feel grounded, independent.
You're in your adult self, fully.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then something really simple happens. Maybe it's a text message, a short phone call from a parent.
Right.
And whatever they say, it could be completely mundane, about the weather, but something inside you just tightens instantly. It's not this clear, raging anger, but it's this complex disappointment, a little storm brewing just behind your eyes.
That flicker is so recognizable, and you might put the phone down and you just know in your gut that the intensity of what you're feeling has almost nothing to do with what just happened.
Right.
It has everything to do with something so much deeper, a lifetime of patterns and unmet expectations, all just echoing in that one moment.
It's that immediate feeling of being pulled back, back into the role of a child, feeling scrutinized or just seen inaccurately. It makes you instantly defensive. So for our deep dive today, I think our mission is really this. What is this very specific, potent kind of irritation trying to tell us? Why does it always seem to point toward the people who gave us life?
That's the core question. And the goal here is to try to move away from that immediate reflex, to blame the parent or even to blame ourselves for having the reaction.
That's a big one.
And instead just settle into a place of deep curiosity. Because if we look at it mindfully, that irritation, it's not a flaw in the system, it's a spotlight, it's a signal.
A spotlight on what?
In that mirror of our parents, we don't just see them. We see our own earliest emotional imprints, our most vulnerable needs, and the deepest patterns of self-protection we built a long time ago.
Okay, so let's unpack the mechanics of that feeling. We've established emotions are messengers, but sometimes with family, irritation feels less like a quiet messenger and more like a landmine.
Well, what's fascinating here is understanding what that emotion really is. Irritation is a subtle but incredibly powerful messenger because it is fundamentally a form of resistance.
Resistance.
It arises precisely when reality, the way your parent is, their tone of voice, the choices they make, doesn't align with your deepest, often unconscious, inner narrative of how they should be.
So we have this fixed script in our heads, and when they go off script, our whole system just registers friction.
Exactly. And nowhere is that script, that narrative, more deeply etched than in our family relationships, because for better or worse, our parents are the original architects of our emotional blueprint. From the moment we're born, our nervous system is just encoding these crucial patterns. We learn what earns love, what's safe to show, what we have to hide to survive.
I find it so freeing to think of those patterns not as like moral flaws, but as adaptations. They were survival tools for us as kids when we had zero power.
Precisely. They're intelligent adaptations. But the thing is, as adults, when we encounter our parents, those original imprints they wake up instantly.
Yeah.
A small piece of unsolicited advice, a certain look, it can trigger an entire constellation of feeling that belongs more to the small, powerless child you were than to the capable adult you are today.
Okay, let's use that really common example.
Yeah.
Say a parent said something that seems totally innocuous, like, you look tired, you should eat more healthy food, and internally, boom, that familiar defensiveness just flares up. Why? It's just a suggestion about a salad.
It is never, ever about the salad. Never.
Right.
Beneath that comment, the irritation is echoing an old, deep belief. A belief like, I'm being scrutinized, I am not enough as I am, my choices are always under judgment.
Yeah.
The irritation you feel has nothing to do with food. It's the child's fundamental fear of not being accepted unconditionally, and that fear is instantly awake and, well, is screaming for a defense.
And that screaming fear brings in the protective layer.
The ego.
A sense of I that needs to assert its own competence.
Absolutely. The ego is a necessary function. It creates our sense of self, it helps us navigate the world. The problem starts when it becomes too rigid, too fragile, when it becomes, you could say, a fortress.
A fortress, I like that.
And this fortress, it insists on maintaining an identity that must be seen as perfectly capable, totally independent, fully healed. It's this ideal image of ourselves.
And after we've spent years building that adult identity, trying to prove we've got it all together, our parents come along and worry or interfere, and they inadvertently fire a small cannonball at the gates of that fortress.
That's the conflict. By reflecting their own anxiety, or even just by offering help that feels unneeded, they threaten that carefully constructed image.
And the reaction.
The reaction, that flash of irritation, the sarcasm pulling away, that's the ego defending the constructed self.
Yep.
It's a defense mechanism firing off to protect the unacknowledged wound of the small child who is still, somewhere deep down, seeking their validation.
But why is the defense so often irritation? Why not just healthy distance or sadness?
That's a brilliant distinction. Irritation is often the fastest, lowest cost defense. Sadness requires you to be vulnerable. Anger requires confrontation. Irritation is a quick, sharp wall that lets us feel, a little bit superior and safe without really engaging. It keeps us in control. It says, you are the problem.
I see. So it's an efficient tool to maintain the fortress when the real feelings underneath are much more tender, like sadness or fear.
Exactly. Fear that we might still desperately need their approval.
So if we're stuck in that cycle, that defensive reaction, how do we shift the perspective? How do we break that chain reaction?
This is the radical reframing. We stop seeing the irritation as a problem to be fixed or pushed down.
And instead,
we start seeing it as a sacred signal. We transform the reaction into an invitation to look closer.
how do you do that practically? In the moment when you feel that defensive heat rising.
And visualize it. See that irritation not as some monster, but as a small trembling animal hiding in the underbrush of your awareness. It isn't dangerous. It's profoundly scared. And its trembling is pointing towards something tender inside of you that needs your attention.
So the practice isn't to chase it away.
The practice is to sit gently beside it and just ask, what old story am I believing about myself right now? What vulnerable need is this feeling trying to guard? The signal isn't change them, the signal is look within.
That shift from I am angry at them to what is this feeling protecting in me? It's profound. It immediately brings the focus from the external trigger back to where we actually have some agency.
And that leads us to the core understanding of human suffering. The suffering we feel doesn't actually come from the external event, the comment, the tone of voice.
It comes from our resistance.
It comes from our resistance to what is. The war starts when we demand, often unconsciously, that our parents be different, more understanding, less critical, just perfect. And reality always wins that fight.
It's the desire for a parent who doesn't exist, colliding with the reality of the parent who does.
Exactly. And that collision creates chronic pain. So the path of liberation isn't about trying to change them, which is impossible. It's about softening our relationship to our own expectations.
Okay, but I have to push back on that a little. When we talk about softening expectations, doesn't that sound a lot like passive resignation? Like we're just giving up and letting hurtful behavior slide?
That is the essential distinction to make. This is not passive resignation. Passive resignation says, I give up. This will destroy me. Acceptance is fundamentally different.
How so?
Acceptance is a clear-eyed acknowledgement of reality. It means seeing them exactly as they are, with their limitations, their blind spots, without the distortion of your resentment or your idealization.
So acceptance is like, okay, I see that you are a person who will always give unsolicited financial advice. That is a fact of your existence.
Yes. And from that place of clear-eyed acceptance, then you can set robust boundaries. Acceptance is seeing the layout of the house. Boundaries are building a stronger fence around your own garden.
So boundaries are still essential.
Absolutely, but they are set from a place of strength and clarity, not from emotional reactivity. And that is the key difference.
And how does that acceptance lead to compassion? That feels like a big leap from irritation to, compassion.
The leap happens when we reframe them. We stop seeing them as these fixed characters in the script of our trauma.
And start seeing them as
fellow travelers on the path of human limitation. They too were shaped by their own deep conditioning, their own generational fears, their own unmet needs. They did the best they could with the emotional tools they had.
Tools that were probably, pretty inadequate.
Likely. Because their parents were also limited, it moves the context away from being a personal failure on their part toward us to being a universal human condition.
It lessens the sting of the personal injury.
Precisely. And compassion, true compassion, arises naturally when you let yourself see their full humanity. The tremor in their hand as they get older, the quiet joy they find in their garden, these small details restore them.
It makes them more than just the parent who disappointed me.
It does. It brings us back to the practice, of meeting this sacred signal in real time. We mentioned that the parent's voice lives inside us. The friction is the gap between who you believe you've become, the conscious, capable adult, and who they still unconsciously see you as the small child. That gap is where the friction lives.
And that friction often leads right back to shame, that feeling of, why can't I just be calm? I've done all this inner work.
That shame is the ego's final trap. But here's the radical truth. The fact that you notice the reactivity, the fact that you can even identify that irritation is present, that meta-awareness is a profound sign of awakening.
So you're not failing.
You are not failing. You are successfully deepening your awareness. You're moving from being the actor in the drama to being the witness of it.
Which is where that alchemy of language comes in, moving from identifying with the feeling to just observing it.
It's the core practice. That subtle but revolutionary shift from "I'm so angry at my mother" to internally "irritation is present." That simple change creates immediate space. It lets you witness the emotion like a passing cloud. It's temporary, it's impersonal, and it's not the whole of who you are.
And at the root of it all, I guess, our expectations are often just crashing into their limitations. Many parents simply don't have the emotional vocabulary to give us what we need.
They operate from their own conditioning, their own survival strategies. They were often taught to fix or suppress emotions, not hold space for them. And now we, with all our modern tools, are asking them to meet us at a level of consciousness they may never reach.
That is a profoundly liberating thought. When we stop waiting for them to apologize or validate us or finally see us as we are, we reclaim our power.
You start outsourcing your sense of worth to people who may never be able to give it to you in the way you need. That waiting game is it's exhausting. Liberation begins when you choose to validate yourself.
So let's get practical. What do we do in that moment when the trigger hits? How do we break the trance?
First, you anchor yourself in the present. When triggered, just pause. Stop speaking. Stop typing. Take 2 deep, conscious breaths. The goal is to interrupt that immediate neural pathway.
Get out of the reaction.
Feel your feet on the ground. Tell yourself internally, this moment is not my childhood. I am safe now. I am the adult in this room. This simple return to the body breaks the trance of identifying with that small, scared child.
That physical grounding is so important. And the second step,
boundaries of integrity. Once you're anchored, you can set boundaries from a place of strength and self-respect, not from reactivity.
But how do you phrase that? Especially as someone who might rely on guilt to get their way.
The language is key. Avoid "you always" or "you never," because that's just accusatory.
Right.
Use I statements that protect your choices. So instead of "you're so controlling about my job," you might say calmly, "I appreciate your concern, but I need you to trust my choices in this area. I'm not going to discuss it further."
It's firm, but it's not an attack.
It's an act of self-love. These boundaries are the contours of your own integrity. They're the strongest signal you can send that you are sovereign and whole.
This whole journey, it started with an external frustration, but is pointing directly back at our own needs, our own power.
The radical insight we arrive at is that the irritation, it was never really about them. It was always about us, our longing, our fear, our deep need to be loved exactly as we are.
They were just the mirror.
They were the mirror, flawed and smudged by their own conditioning, but a mirror showing us where we are still waiting for wholeness.
And the key is realizing that our wholeness was never theirs to give or take away in the first place.
The moment we stop waiting for that permission to be whole, that's when liberation begins. This is forgiveness as a homecoming, a return to self. And there's an unexpected grace in this.
What's that?
Your parents gave you life, and they also gave you the exact conditions that push you to seek awareness. Had they been perfect, you might never have questioned or searched or looked within. Their limitations, in a strange way, became your doorway to depth.
That reframes the entire narrative. The pain becomes a catalyst for growth. Their flaws become a kind of necessary gift.
Think of that weight of irritation as a sealed letter you've carried for years. You thought it was addressed to them, full of demands. But what if that letter was always meant for you? And when you finally open it, you find not blame, but grief, and fierce love for the child you were, and deep compassion for the parents they couldn't be.
Opening that letter is the end of the war inside.
It is. You stop needing them to be anyone other than who they are, and every time that irritation rises again, and it will, it's not a sign of failure, it's just a sacred compass saying, here, pay attention here, this part still needs your love.
A profound guidepost to carry forward. The sacred signal guiding us back to ourselves.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to carry into your day. What if the part of you that still bristles at your parents' voice, the part that feels instantly defensive, is the exact same part that longs most deeply to be held? And what if, right now, in this very breath, you could offer that deep, steady holding to yourself?